Time for another shift here, another discussion. So last year, the Global Biodiversity Festival, it came together in about 3 weeks. It went from idea to a living, breathing festival with over 60 speakers in under 3 weeks. We had a great group from all over the world, but one thing Paul and I realized is, we really were missing the investment piece, the finance piece, and how important that is. So that's something we really made an effort to try to bring back in or bring into the festival this year in year 2. So to help us out with that a little bit, we've got Kristin Rechberger joining us. She's the founder and CEO of Dynamic Planet, a firm that helps advance and invest in markets that restore nature. It focuses on developing responsible business with high impact partners that regenerate landscapes, seascapes, and communities, optimizing environmental, social, and economic returns. So before founding Dynamic Planet in 2012, Kristin was Senior Vice President of Global Programs and Partnerships with the National Geographic Society. And she also continues to serve on boards like the Prince of Wales Charitable Foundation, National Geographic Pristine Seas, and Smithsonian Institution's Earth Optimism. So let's get Kristin in here with us. Hey, Kristin, how are you?
Joe, it's so nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's great to have you joining us. One just has to do a little search online to see that you're very passionate about conservation and, what we can do to help protect our planet, elevating the right people. And, it's exciting to have you join us to talk a little bit about the finance piece and how much of an important part that's going to be.
Yeah, for sure. I'm still trying to get over the last session of those great gibbons and all the wonderful work that you've been doing for the last few days. So thank you so much for having this festival, Joe. It's really, really terrific. Yeah, I think any of us that have worked in conservation have struggled with financing, right? How do you pay for this? Yeah. And it's hard when nature traditionally has been free and therefore not priced and therefore not valued, right? And so a lot of questions for a lot of groups, especially NGOs we've worked with over the years, is how do you possibly make sure that things are sustainably financed and can even potentially even be profitable in the long run and be reinvested back into it. And so in National Geographic, we saw a lot of those types of projects and help develop their impact and business plans. And that's a lot of what we do now at Dynamic Planet, including with partners like National Geographic's Pristine Seas.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. So Dynamic Planet works with high impact partners, advancing conservation markets and restoring nature. So a lot of people viewing might not be familiar with conservation markets. Can you kind of share a little bit? Tell us a little bit how that works.
Sure. When I started Dynamic Planet in 2012, I used to I live in Washington, D.C., and be at a dinner party and say, yeah, so what do you do? Well, I help build conservation businesses. And people will be like, is that an oxymoron? It's like, no, you can actually make money and do the right thing for the environment. And the good news is we're no longer getting those kinds of questions. I think conservation markets are really a lot of groups are really good at a conservation plan or a science monitoring plan or biological plan, but really, what's your business plan? How can you really figure out your revenue streams and either fundraise for it or in the long run, maybe create an endowment if there isn't a market. But if there is a market, how do you really look at how to sustain these businesses over time and grow them? And especially with equity back to the local communities, which is a key piece, because one of the equity issues in conservation is that a lot of things get valued up the supply chain, but not at the local level. And I loved the line on your last video before I came on of local people who understand local conditions. That's exactly what we're trying to do, is drive all of the power that we can possibly have, whether it's policy or finance, to these local people so they can do the best with the resources that they deserve.
Yes, absolutely. I think, and I'm so glad we're seeing this. I think kind of fading away in the distance are the days where someone just drops in and starts telling other people how to manage their resources. Well, they can look back and be like, well, where's your old growth forest? And you're coming here and telling me what we need to do with our resources. So yeah, it's a very exciting time right now, and connecting with so many grassroots organizations, organizations that were started and then, the young leaders rose through and are taking them over. It's so exciting to see things like that.
It is. And you're bringing up a really important thing, Joe, which is the alignment issue. So, if someone comes from the outside, they might not know all the layers of the history and culture and natural systems and the current people that live there and how that all evolved over time, which is, of course, where indigenous knowledge and all those important factors come in. So people come in with their own ideas and it just might not align. And that alignment's critical, including with the funding side. You can't just swoop in and expect money to do the right thing in the right place if it's not properly aligned. So what we try to do is really find that when we mentioned high impact partners, it could be government leaders, it could be community leaders, it could be business leaders, but whoever really has that holistic view of the place are the teams that we like to work with to try to evolve the market in that place and create a regenerative market instead of what's traditionally been an extraction market in a lot of ways in a lot of places.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you have a major conservation target, we hear a lot about 30 by 30, so 30% of the land and ocean by 2030.
Yeah.
Where does conservation finance fit in? Is there a role for the public and private sector, finance and businesses?
Yeah, so those kinds of campaigns of 30 by 30, 30% of land and sea protected by 2030 are really important North Star kind of rally the troops type of things. And if you're talking to governments when they're signing on to these things, the first question they ask is, this sounds good, but how much will it cost?
Yeah.
So there are resource mobilization party, a work stream figuring things out. And there's been great reports in the last year or two that help inform this work, whether it's the Waldron report, Dasgupta review, all these great things that have come out around biodiversity and finance that actually weren't really clear and aggregated around the things we're trying to solve by 2030 until the last couple of years. So with a lot of this best thinking of economists and mapping and resource mobilization, there is public sector interest in trying to figure out, like in the Green New Deal in Europe, for example, or the new Biden administration in the US, how do we really start to pay for this and turn our markets in the right direction? Related to that public financing, of course, is subsidies, including fossil fuel subsidies, which can keep a lot of these issues entrenched with current self-interest. And a lot of the systems that we're trying to change in conservation are actually being eroded by subsidies. And we actually learned that, what we need to regenerate our economies is just a very small fraction of what we're paying in subsidies as taxpayers in our country. So there's a lot of big substantive public sector things to change. And on the private sector side, it's also really important that you have the different types of private sector financing, starting with philanthropy, but going into impact investing as a market matures, and then opening up bigger private sector opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. That line of how much will it cost? It's so short-sighted when, the cost of not doing it is so astronomically high, and returns now will pay off so much in the future. It's hard to get out of. We just can't seem to get government out of that mentality.
I know. Even in the U.S., we know that the national parks, which are struggling, they generate 10 times what we put in just from the markets around them, from the local communities and all the other things that benefit. And that's probably a conservative estimate. So it is. We need to do, I think, a better job in our narratives for those of us who are working on these issues to really help create the value that has been externalized by traditional capitalism, basically.
Yeah. So kind of touching on that cost of not doing anything, how does the health of our environment, affect things like small businesses? How do corporate value chains and sustainable development goals fit in?
You probably know from COVID that a lot of small businesses really struggled. It showed, I think 2020 was pretty drastic reveal of how much resilience we still need to build into our supply chains. And our supply chains really start at the base, right? At the local community level, and where conservation really matters. And whether it was small scale fishermen or of course tourism operations and all these other groups that we try to work with to build a holistic conservation market, it was really tough. A lot of groups found alternative ways to survive, and different local markets versus international markets and other things, shifted. But it was a shock to the system, and it was shock, obviously, to the global economy. And we're still trying to figure out exactly, what this all looks like. And it'll have been an important moment when we look back on 2020 for sure. But I think when you look at the value chains, what you're also seeing in this current moment, which is such an exciting time, I think, in our work, is people have had this time to take some deep inventory, I think, whether you're just a normal person voting or buying things, or also a business leader, and saying, I wonder if I can do better, because things are pretty bleak, right?
Yeah.
And then all this talk of investors and company commitments towards ESG, environmental, social, and governance, with investments in things. There's a huge momentum of commitments right now. And I think groups like ours are going to be helping them deliver on their commitments and make sure they're real, make sure they have the real transformational impact that is necessary right now, instead of just these nice political, like, rah-rah statements. So I'm excited that kind of big company like Microsoft saying they're not only going to be carbon neutral, but nature positive. I mean, all these companies are saying huge things in the last 6 months, and even U.S. dairy and beef associations, and it goes on and on. So I think that will be resonating with all the way down the value chain to how things are supplied, hopefully with more transparency and equity. And I think it's an exciting time.
Oh, I no question think it's an exciting time. I mean, you just have to look, with the last administration pulling out of the climate agreement, and a lot of organizations kind of stepped up to say, well, we're not, we're gonna keep going towards our goals.
Exactly.
And it's almost kind of frustrating when you hear, as we slowly start to maybe come out of this pandemic with the vaccines, people saying, I can't wait to go back to normal. I can't wait to go back to how things were before, when you just want to know, because how things were before is why we're in this situation.
Exactly.
Diversity. And so it's really exciting to see some of these changes happening, and corporations starting to step up. But it is kind of worries you a little bit when you hear, I can't wait to get back to the way things were.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think there is definitely these tensions, right, between kind of a Green New Deal type of trajectory, and a lot of groups wanting to join that, and then kind of this entrenched, I want to double down and let's try to. And I think we don't know what's going to come out in the next 6-12 months. I think, I think we're nowhere near through this yet.
Absolutely. Well, in my intro, I talked about how you work with partners to build regenerative seascapes, landscapes. Can you give us an example of one of the projects you're working on?
Yeah, sure. So I was lucky to go to Gabon with the Pristine Seas team back in 2012. Seems like a lifetime ago. And it was a really, really special trip, because it was with Mike Fay, who did the mega transect across Gabon and helped set up the national parks on the land. And with Minister Lee White currently in office, they invited us back to do a sea transect. So Pristine Seas was able to help design the most regenerative area of Gabon, 30% of its coastline of a blue Gabon, and really try to hook that up with the green Gabon planning from the decade before. And I bring up this example because we work on a lot of projects at the subnational or local level, but this is a national project with a visionary leadership that actually wants to build basically a country of conservation markets. And that is, to me, so exciting, to have a sustainable conservation economy. Yeah. Right now, as you probably know, Gabon is a petrol country, and they really want to diversify. They've been in that really mono industry since the 70s, and they're thinking about sustainable timber, and also all sorts of interesting tourism and smart agriculture. And I think that it just has the potential, given that it is so pristine still, land and sea, that if done well, it could really be a showcase country for the world. And there really aren't that many like them. I think, what would be the other one? Bhutan, maybe, that has that kind of opportunity and planning. And what we see is a lot of countries really want that vision. And even during COVID, and for example, in tourism, some countries are really taking the time to reset what they want in quality versus quantity, or values aligned visitors and things like that. So for example, like in Panama or Palau or Iceland or even Venice and Barcelona, there was so much over tourism, or the kind of tourism they weren't happy with through 2020. They're taking the time to reset what they want. And so we work with groups like that, but also just to have a place like Gabon where you have like a holistic view of all sorts of sectors, really looking at a long-term plan, thinking about how you can really bring a lot more benefits to the local people is an exciting piece of work for us right now.
No question. Gabon is such a beautiful country with so much intact natural resources. A good friend of mine, Joe Cutler, he just finished a mega transect of the Ogui River. So over 1,000 kilometers, sampling the biodiversity all the way along, pack rafting. We did live events with classrooms all the way down the river.
Oh, wonderful.
And it was just amazing. But you're right, it really is kind of at this point where there's a decision to be made because, this is one of Africa's last wild rivers and there's multiple dam projects proposed. So
I'm sure
kind of racing against time to show what's there and bring it to the government and say, this is what's here. This is where at stake. So yeah, it's exciting to hear that these conversations are happening. And there's a possibility for it to be a really great kind of showpiece of what can happen, what good management, sustainable management can look like.
It's cool too, because you have the traditional ways of planning and some of the things that you can do like with agroforestry or fishing and other pieces. And then there's the carbon markets too. So we have really great data for Gabon's coastline. And then they also have amazing forests also. So they are rich in carbon. And as people think about carbon markets as one more layer of how you put together a conservation economy, they're in good shape.
Yeah. So, one thing Paul Rose and I have been discussing kind of leading up to the festival and then, over the 3 days and seeing the themes that have been coming out of it, is we've been talking to all kinds of scientists and conservationists and explorers, talking to finance people, a lot of people who do spend their time in the field. So we're really kind of thinking about the key takeaways and the new ideas that we can take away from this festival. We want kind of that bigger picture. We want a sustainable economic future. So, I know you've tuned in a little bit, over the 3 days, and I'm wondering if you've seen anything kind of emerging, anything that's kind of grabbed your attention.
For me, it feels like people are thinking about business side more, I think. And I think that it seems like even in the last session, there is this long-term planning element. People are sticking with things for a long time. And that, of course, requires the funding commitment to do that, which is great. Because sometimes you've seen these projects come and go just based on you just didn't have enough money to get to the next stage. So I think that things are moving in that direction. I do think that, like the gentleman on the last session said, you kind of need a 20-year time frame to think about this stuff. And what we like to do is see where things are at a certain stage, whether it's a place that's just been protected or it's in the implementation stage or even maturity stage, and how do you move it to the next level of maturity in hopes that it can be even more solid from a financial standpoint. And I guess I was hearing more of that in the stories this festival. What do you think?
No, I think so 100%. I think people are starting to realize that, investments, green investments can pay off just as much, if not better, than kind of the traditional investments that we've been investing in. And, we talked to Will from Aviva, and he just shared this excellent point. People are making investments towards their retirement and their future. But if you're making investments that are going to hurt that future retirement and your quality of life, what's the point in making those investments?
Exactly. No, I mean, when I speak to some traditional finance houses and they say, we're really conservative about where we put our money. We're building for our next family's legacy and our grandchildren and great grandchildren, and people will never know. And I'm like, that's great. What kind of world do you want them to live in? Yeah. So it's exactly that. It's being smarter about how we can direct capital, which is a really powerful. The capital markets are really powerful and really important. And I think if they're directed the right way, they can have major benefits and success. And we already are seeing, back to this ESG indicator and signals. I mean, we're seeing people really wanting to find deals that are shovel ready and really have social, environmental, and financial returns. And of course, there's some people that do tend more on the financial side versus the others. And there's others that are like, I made a lot of money, or that's really not my main, that's not what turns me on, but I really want that park to be standing by the time I pass and make sure that other people enjoy it, So
yeah.
It's, I think we're seeing a real awakening. And then like you said, I do see more and more people walking the walk.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm glad you touched on that next generation, because that's something that, I love seeing, as someone who was originally an educator before kind of moving into the work that I'm doing now with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, is just seeing how switched on this generation is, and how much they realize what's at stake, and how they're not waiting till they're an adult. They're waiting, and they're not waiting. They're using their voice. They're being heard. They're launching projects, and they're not being quiet. So that's, we hosted several kind of young youth leaders throughout the weekend as well, which was another great piece to add to the festival. And that's really exciting. I just wish we could get them into power a little bit quicker.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kristin, this has been great. What a great conversation. I think I see Paul backstage. If you're back there, Paul, turn on your camera, because I think we should bring Paul in. He's really been excited about the finance side of things, and he's talked so much about the lovely thread that kind of goes from in the field, collecting data, and then where it goes, and who makes decisions with that. So I see him there. There he is, nice and early for Paul. Hey, Paul.
You're supposed to be sleeping. It's really
hey, I've enjoyed your session. Really great stuff.
Oh my
Absolutely
goodness.
Tremendous. And it's near the end of the festival. There's only 2 more left. We've got the Royal Geographical Society and Russia to wrap it up.
That's
in a geographical, we're a geographical festival, so why not wrap it up with geography? But preceding that, we can't go wrong with your input, Kristin, because we've had everything. And we've had, you might have seen the Arctic Philharmonic, who did an amazing job of telling us, we've got to use music to communicate global issues. I think we've caught the thing where, it can be a lonely place at the front line, where these people are doing research, doing great stuff, and yet feel, particularly these days, they're not being heard.
For sure.
Normally they might get visitors, they might get ecotourists, they might get funders and supporters and influential people coming to see their project. And, it makes you feel great, doesn't it? You're in the field and here comes, great, you show what you've done, and there's a sense of outreach. Well, all of a sudden that's not happening beyond, say, science papers or laptop sessions just like this. So we've really connected those people with people like the Arctic Philharmonic, with you, with BBC reporters and journalists and conservation workers and photographers all over the world. So it's really felt like one big tent.
That's so wonderful.
I've been so excited about this thread. I mean, you and I have spoken about this, Kristin. I've spoken about a lot with Henrik, that this invisible, uncelebrated thread that connects someone at the front line getting out their tent every 3 hours to take a weather observation and global economies. And all of a sudden we've got the ultimate motivation for carrying on, because we know that every single data point is getting somewhere. It's being listened to. So you beautifully described it. So everybody that's watching, I went to sleep last night and there was 82 countries that we'd reached. I don't know how many there are right now, but everybody that's watching, those of you that are in the field work, Kristin's just given you the ultimate encouragement. Keep at it.
Well, you guys have been amazing. You keep at it. And it's been such an inspiration to be part of this, and a wonderful festival again this year.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Kristin. Thanks for the input and for the encouragement to keep going. It's all going somewhere. It's not just going into some dusty old paper somewhere.
No.
Every data point means something. Thanks to you and your team.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Paul and Joe.
Kristin, thanks so much for joining us. Amazing
again,
work,
Kristin.
Amazing work Dynamic Planet is doing, and just a real pleasure to have you joining us as we wrap up these 3 days, and hearing Paul talk about sleep. What is sleep? What is that, Paul?
Yeah, this guy, he's off the charts, this guy.
And Kristin, just to say as well, Dynamic Planet, that's the name.
That's what we're all living it, aren't we?
That's all you need. Absolutely love that name. See you soon, Kristin. We miss you.
Miss you too. We'll see you soon. And thanks again, Joe.
Thanks, mate.
Kristin.
Thanks.
See ya.
Yeah. Love it.